Welcome to my live. Let me see. Testing, 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 testing. Okay. I think I got this. I'm gonna go live on Instagram too, which I wasn't even planning on doing that, but I guess I will go live. Oh, I won't be able to. Oh, wait. Oh, you know what? Maybe I should use the iPhone. Let me see. I'm about to get started. 1 second. This live is called Children. Babies and children are the real MVPs. They are the most valuable people. Babies and children are the most valuable people. So this had been on my heart for some time. As you all know, I've always had this love for babies, but I actually have a love for just children in general, which I didn't really understand and hone in on. And then I was thinking today how I went through a program when I was in high school, and that program was called a thematics program, and it was really geared towards education as they were trying to increase the number of educators and teachers in the school district. And the deal was that if we went through this program for 4 years, then we had like a scholarship or partial scholarship to Kent State University as an education major. Some people certainly took advantage of that. I studied this concept of education and early childhood development. And then when I was in the 12th grade and I had to go on my internship, I interned at an elementary school where I was teaching kindergartners. And I was all for the idea of becoming an educator to an extent until I did this internship. And for whatever reason, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be a teacher. I still had this desire to become a midwife. And I was like, no, I'd rather work for babies. And as I think about it now, I think that I did that because, or I decided to go against, hey, that's my puppy who is not really a puppy anymore. Lady, ma'am, hey, ma'am, get your bone. Won't you chew on that? Okay. So now that I reflect back on it, I don't know why I was like resistant to working with children. And I think it was because I did not like the education system. I was not a fan of the institution of education and how it was carried out. For the same reason why I wanted to be a midwife, but I didn't want to work in a hospital. So at an early age, I was aware that I didn't like institutions or the thought of there being this sort of system around something that's supposed to come very natural to us. And learning is one of those things that are supposed to come very natural to us. So fast forward, y'all know I do tarot oracle, right? So I had these cards, they call it life purpose, right? So periodically I might pull them, but almost every time that I pull these cards, they always say that I'm supposed to work with like children. And I'm so resistant to it. I have been so resistant to it in the past. Every time I get this card, I'm like, what is this talking about? Like children, I don't want to work with children. And when I say children, for me, that doesn't include babies, like, but even in being a doula, I wasn't working with the babies. I was working with the families more so, for the most part, I was there as a support companion to the mother or to the family. And then I was teaching them on how to care for the babies. So a part of my evolution now at this point is me realizing that seems to me that I'm moving in the direction of teaching children, because I believe that children, and I've always said this for many years, if you know me, I've always said that babies and children are closest to the spirit world because they haven't long left it. Like they're close to it. They come into this world as infinite intelligence, as we all do. But that is diminished within us over the years because it's adults that come into our lives, first our parents, then teachers, systems that then tell us that we have to do and be a certain way. And so we lose more and more of who we are as we get older because society is trying to mold us to be a certain way or do a certain thing. And I'm going to give an example of what I mean by that and how we oftentimes are, as children, we are taught to not be ourselves, taught to not ask for what we want, taught to just be people pleasers. And so I just posted something on Instagram, which prompted me to do this live because in the middle of the night, I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I had this sort of epiphany, so to speak, that came over my heart that I ended up tweeting out. And basically, I was saying that we need to build schools and environments that's supportive of children's infinite intelligence from the moment that they're born. Like we have to protect children from adults and their limited beliefs and their limited belief systems and the limitations that they put on children, because they're trying to put children into a box to be a good little boy or a good little girl. But what is that? And it has nothing to do with who we are. So who we are meant to be, who we are meant to grow to be. So here's an example of what I mean. So if you know anything about spiritual laws, and let's say law of attraction or just any universal laws, I had shared this story before on one of my YouTube videos, but I'm gonna share it again. So I had went to the salon to get my hair done. It was one of the stylists in there. Two of her children was in there, a baby that was around 4 months old and a little boy who was like 5. So when he come into the salon, because he was at school, so when he came into the salon, he immediately asked her for her phone. So she told him no. He asked her like 2 more times, and she was like, no. So she told him, she says, go sit down over there. She was like, go sit down over there. I'm working, whatever. So he went across the room and he sat down. And as soon as he sat down, he was like, but I still want the phone. And so she got upset and she took him in the back and she spanked him. Now, mind you, he just coming in from school. He's at the salon. There's no toys there. There's nothing to do there, really, And so when he asks for the phone, she is punishing him for asking, right? Well, what we would say as mothers, like asking too many times or whatever, like, but what's that? So she take him in the back, she spank him. So when he come back, he's sitting down, but he's still restless, because he's a kid. But the opposite is true for the baby, right? So every time the baby cry, the baby gets attention to, pick the baby up, feed the baby, whatever. But a baby's cry is the only way for that baby to communicate. And so that baby is asking as well, but that's the only way the baby know how to ask. But the baby isn't punished for asking. This child is punished for asking. And so that's how we as people from a young age learn to not ask for what we want. And that's a very, very important principle of the universe is you have to ask for what you want. If you don't ask for what you want, you definitely won't receive it. So we're taught from an early age to not ask for what we want, even though that's what we have been doing since birth is asking through crying and the communication that we develop as we get older and older. So that's an example of how adults diminish a child's childlike wonder and imagination and universal law of asking for what it is that you want. And so as parents, we don't know this, right? But at the same time, we do know that there were certain things that occurred when we were children that we didn't like. Like it's things that you don't do to your children or for your children that was done to you, or vice versa, that there were things that you wanted done as a child, but it wasn't done for you that you now do for your children. And so we have this notion of, what's in alignment with us and what's not in alignment with us. But we don't realize that children, they are our best teachers because again, they haven't long left the spiritual world. So they are full of infinite intelligence. They come here all knowing. A lot of the clients that I work with, when they tell me like they don't know what their purpose is, one of the first things I say to them is like, well, what did you want to do when you were a kid? Because whatever you took an interest in when you were a child, that's generally what it is that you are supposed to do on this earth. You're going to do it in a unique way. It's going to be your niche, but it is what you're supposed to be doing. And so what happens is that we go to school, we start to be influenced by other people. And then before career day, when they ask everybody what they want to do or what they want to be when they grow up, then everybody want to be a policeman and a firefighter and these things because that's accepted, right? I mean, when you a child, you don't know how to say like, oh, I want to be a curator in an art museum. Like you don't know what that is. And you a lot of times struggle with defining what that thing is when you are getting older, so to speak, in our world. But I think that it would benefit us as a society to start exposing children to these different fields, so that they start to get a sense of what it is that they want to do, even if they can't really name it, because maybe what you are meant to do hasn't been done before. And so there may not be a name for it. There may not be a definition yet to what it is that you are here to put in this world, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't put it into this world. A lot of times we end up jumping on the bandwagon for no reason. And this is a reason for me. Like, I don't really advertise my coaching and consulting services. I did at first just out of naturalness, I suppose. Like, oh, hey, I do this thing, or whatever. But I don't do that anymore because the internet is flooded with coaches and consultants and mentors and people who swearing that they can change your life for $50,000, right? And I'm like, well, how will somebody distinguish, who is the real deal for what they do or not when everybody doing the same thing? So I don't do that anymore. Like here and there, I might like post something and I'll say like, if you ready for the next step, then you contact me. But I don't have trouble getting clients either. Like people contact me, people just DM me, people just reach out to me, whether they following my content or they just know me as a person and they like, oh my God, I really, need this. Can you help me with this or whatever? And so I choose to do it in that way because what I do is unique in my niche in terms of what I bring to this world. And so the people that it's for will find me, right? And so I, from a very early age, took a special interest in spiritual development. Like since I was like 4 or 5 years old, I was already into zodiac and astrology and moon and stars. And I knew so much about this at just this very young age. I did, and it kind of really led me to my curiosity around birth because I was fascinated by the fact that a species, whether that's a human, species, or that's an animal, could um, grow this being inside of it and then give birth to it. And I like kind of wanted to know, well, around this phenomenon, besides the fact that male and the female comes together for reproductive purposes and this what happens, but I wanted to learn more about it from like a spiritual aspect, like, oh well, does this life already know what it's here to do? How does this life get to know everything it is about themselves? And so I took a interest in zodiac and astrology because I was just extremely interested in myself. Like I was just really interested in myself and knowing everything about myself. And so that's one of the things for us as well as people is that we don't take an interest in ourselves, but then we expect for other people to be interested in us. Well, if you don't find yourself to be interested, then I mean, nobody is going to find you to be interested either. I mean, that's just how it goes, right? But every child is interesting and every person is interesting too. But if they don't know that because that part of themselves is underdeveloped, which gets stifled as we grow, because sometimes people say things to us that stick in our minds from an early age, but we got to be able to let that go. You have to look at yourself from how you see yourself on the inside. You can't allow the outside world to influence how you see yourself. And I wrote this long post on Facebook about this today, because I've been seeing this news about Joe Rogan, and apparently he said nigga, and so people, they, NDIRE, I see she pulling her music off of Spotify and stuff. And I was just like, man, we live in a world where everybody is super sensitive and completely insecure about who they are, because who cares that somebody said something? What does that have to do with who you are, who you know yourself to be? If we have to monitor everything that we say, I mean, try monitoring yourself for everything that you say you think. That's exhausting within itself. So we worry too much about what's happening outside of ourselves. We are a culture of people who know nothing about us, nothing about ourselves. And when I say ourselves, I mean on an individual level, not a culture of people, not a community of people, but who are you? Who are you? And if we allow for children to grow in this spiritual development from an early age, these are not questions that we'll be asking ourselves at 30 years old, at 40 years old, at 50 years old. When you see people who talking about they had a midlife crisis, it's like, yeah, because you were never supported in understanding and knowing who you were from an early age. So in my opinion, that has to be more of the push around how do you get to know more about you, and that is how you start to develop a positive self-identity, because then you start to see all of these characteristics and traits about yourself that you like, oh, that's pretty cool, I know how to do that, I'm skilled in that, I'm talented, oh gosh, look at me, I'm like out here killing it. But you have to get to know you, be interested in getting to know yourself, and that's something that we can help children do from a very early age, instead of being grown as fuck and not knowing your head from your ass. Which is what ends up happening, is that we don't know what direction that we going in, and we just moving through life, just existing, not living. That was in my memories today on Facebook, that I wrote that 7 years ago on Facebook. Like, are you living or are you existing? And do you know the difference? Because most people don't know the difference. Most people would say that they are living, but they're not. They're existing. They're still doing what other people are telling them to do. They still are allowing themselves and their freedom to be stifled in some sort of way, because it becomes normal. It becomes normal. And I had to take a step back and kind of look at my life, because I was thinking about how I like never wanted to do anything that other people did. I was just not interested. I wasn't interested in being like anybody else. I was interested in totally being myself and figuring out who that was. And this is why I never joined groups. This is why I have, for the most part, been a more solo person. I certainly have had close friends, but I really have been more of a hermit and just kind of like on a solo dolo my entire journey, I because in the times in my life where I attempted to like be more a part of groups and stuff like that, then I found myself allowing myself to be influenced by others, even though I knew that that was like not me, and so that is a part of me having to continue to develop myself and who I was in order to at all times unwavering, standing in who I am. And so sometimes we get caught up in that because we want to be accepted, but we're taught that from an early age. And this whole Black movement over the last 100 years or couple 100 years, or even in the last 50 or 60 years in civil rights, that is what that was about, is teaching Black people how to be accepted, as opposed to honoring the uniqueness in each individual and to just be yourself. That you don't need acceptance from anybody. You don't need to be equal to anybody. How are you going to ever be equal to anybody? You ain't going to never be equal to anybody because everybody is different. There is no such thing as equity unless you want to be equal to somebody else. So the whole concepts and the language and the narrative that we use and we tell ourselves is so convoluted. But all of this could actually be avoided or fixed again if we began with the babies and the children and helping them to develop themselves on a very, very spiritual level, because they're already there. They just need the space and they need the support to continue in their spiritual development and growth. And that spiritual development and growth leads to their mental development and growth. And then that leads to their emotional development and growth. And then that is a physical expression. That becomes a physical expression of who they are spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. Now, granted, I went to school for education. I don't have a degree in childhood development. I have never picked up an early childhood development book. For me, this is all common sense because I understand things from a more spiritual, esoteric level, that this just makes sense. And I don't need a book and I don't need a so-called expert to tell me or tell me what they understand only in the three-dimensional world, right? Which that's the world that I choose to be a part of. It's not a world that is of me. I operate on a 5D level. I participate on a 3D level, but that is not where I get my instruction from, because that is actually the plane that all of these institutions have been constructed from, is from a 3D level, and that's not going to help us in any kind of way. We can't solve anything from a 3D level. We have to solve everything from a 5D level, but we don't quite understand what that 5D level means, what that looks like, and how to get to it. But what I will say is that once you get to that level, it's no turning back. You can't, you're not normal no more. Like you can't know about that plane, exist in that plane, and look at the world the same. Like you can't, and so children come here on a 5D level. Birth is a very sacred event. They are already on the 5D level. That's why they grow physically so fast. They grow within a year and they keep growing. And the truth is, we would keep growing at that rate if we were not stifled. So when you hear in the past about it was giants and it was, or people lived for a much longer period of time, like that's true, because they were spiritually developing and they kept spiritually developing, and nobody around them was stifling their spiritual growth and therefore their mental growth and therefore their emotional growth. And so they kept growing. So we can continue to grow, but we don't, because we have no imagination anymore. We don't have this childlike wonder. And we're afraid of what other people might think of us. And we are afraid of what other people might say and how we might look to other people. But that's totally not important. It's like not important at all. It's the least important thing you could ever be bothered with in your mind is what somebody else gonna think, because why? Why? It don't even matter. So yeah, I just wanted to jump on and just support what I was saying in my Instagram post, Twitter post, and Instagram post about children being the most valuable people. And they are our teachers. And we could learn so much from them if we would stop telling them to shut up and that they aren't um or they don't know what they're talking about because they little, where they actually know what they're talking about, and adults don't know what they're talking about anymore because somebody has stifled their imagination and told them, that they can't do anything, and they have this fear-based, sort of mentality. So peace to y'all.